Waiters, what dating disasters have you witnessed? I was bartending at a restaurant in San Francisco. This guy came in and ordered a vodka martini. He downed it and ordered another. Halfway through his third he called his wife and asked for a divorce. After he hung up we talked about the Red Sox. I'm from Boston. I was bartender at a country club in college and I watched a woman curse her husband out at their table because the husband kept flirting with the waitress. She got really loud and walked out. Keep in mind this was a nice restaurant at an upscale country club. The waitress felt it was all her fault, but she told me the guy had been coming in there often and tipping her 100% of the bill every time. I feel horrible because I'd never remember everyone who worked at mine's name, but they had to always remember mine. They really do flirt with you though, and they would hire the prettiest girls they could find. Drinking at a country club was a mess. They don't cut you off and you can order whatever you want. I worked briefly as a waiter at a semi-nice place near me. I had a couple come in for a date who we've seen there a few times before. I think it was their regular dating place. She was very clearly sad and was talking about how her uncle was really sick and was probably going to pass away soon. He decided to pull out the ring and pop the question anyway. Seriously, dude, read the room. Okay, here's a great story that I've been wanting to share. I work at a small bakery in my town. I am general kitchen staff and not a waiter, but I was there when this all went down. It was around 2 in the afternoon. The day had been normal, but suddenly I saw the retail staff in a huddle and took my first opportunity to go see what was happening. Apparently a couple had come in on this summer day, ordered 2 bowls of soup and sat down. The girl that took their order went to the back and prepared their soup for them, then brought it back out. In the time it took for her to get the soup, the woman had taken off her flip-flop, put her leg across the table, and the guy was going to town sucking on this lady's toes in the middle of the restaurant. The waitress didn't notice until she went to place the soup on the table. She stood there in shock, and the couple was oblivious to her presence. This guy's going all in, and the lady is starting to moan by the time they realize their soup is ready. The waitress was in complete shock for the rest of her shift, and that couple is no longer allowed on the premises. This place has even more weird stories, from someone forcing open the back door to ask for a hamburger to a complete stranger coming out of the basement and acting like he's supposed to be there. Not to mention the time I watched a bird fly out of a hole in the ceiling. Kentucky can be a weird place. I worked at a bar in a hotel for 5 years. I had a table come down from their hotel room and sit at one of my pub tables for dinner. From the moment they sat down, you could tell the wife was furious about something. She was unbelievably pleasant toward me, but did not say a single word to the man at the table. I get their drinks and then their orders. He ordered steak and she ordered the sauciest pasta dish we had on the menu. About 20 minutes later, the wife still hadn't said a word to the man since they sat down. Their food was done and my food runner set it on the table. Right as I was about to walk over to see if they needed anything else, I saw the woman stand up, say go frick yourself, John, as she picked up the plate of pasta and dumped it all over his head and down into his lap. Then she very calmly walked out of the bar and back up to her hotel room. I spent a few minutes helping the man clean up and got my manager to come handle the situation from there, as it was way above my pay grade at that point. Later in the night, the woman came back to the bar without the man and we talked for a while. Turns out he admitted to cheating on her right before their dinner reservation. I never saw either of them again. Bartender here. A couple on a blind date took their seats directly across from the dishwasher, so I had to pretend I couldn't hear him. 40 plus, balding, overweight, and drunk. Asking her, 30 plus, pretty, friendly, and level-headed. Listen, I see you over there, just amazing and gorgeous, and I'm wondering what you're seeing in me. What do you think? She smiled, cringed, and made an effort to sidestep his questions and change the subjects at least 3 times, while he ordered shots of Fireball at an upscale establishment. For both of them, she would politely refuse, and he would end up drinking both of them. He didn't seem to be big on learning. Fireball, the drink of upscale establishments and Carnival cruise lines. I used to work at a bar where 70% of the customers were on Tinder dates. There was a line of 2-person booths along the wall when you first walk in. There were 2 dudes sitting by themselves in 2 different booths. Both of them were facing the door. One was in the first booth, one was in the last booth. This girl comes in and walks up to the first booth, says hi to the guy, and sits down. They are chatting for about 5 minutes when the other guy who is sitting by himself comes up to her and says, "Hey, I'm so and so. Aren't you so and so?" They all talk for like 30 seconds and she gets up and goes and sits with the other guy at the last booth. Eventually a different girl shows up for a date with the guy at the first booth. I don't know exactly what happened, but I almost died watching it unfold. She was definitely embarrassed. Oh man, I am really bad at remembering faces. Walking into a restaurant for a first or second date and not being able to remember what the person looks like is such a nightmare. I'm married now, so I'm saved from the heck that is dating. I worked fine dining in Vail, Colorado. I once saw a lady throw red wine all over a guy's shirt and leave. He sat and continued eating his spaghetti plate. No fricks. Shirt's already ruined. Now he doesn't even have to be careful with the spaghetti. A couple of friends and I went to the Mexican restaurant where another friend was waiting tables. There was a couple kind of catty cornered from us that had a bit of an off vibe. We could see them, but not really hear them. So we asked our server friend what was up. She said it seemed to be a first or second date that was a bit awkward. The girl had ordered one of those enormous margaritas and was not sharing it. I had to go make a phone call, back in the payphone days, and when I came back, I ended up sitting with my back to the couple. Maybe 10 minutes later, I hear our friend the server say, no, and the sound of a full punch bowl being emptied from a great height. Giant margarita girl had stood up, swayed a bit, and vomited all over their meals, table, and the surrounding floor. The restaurant calmed everyone sitting nearby, and the girl's date abandoned her in the ensuing chaos. Bit off topic, but I'm a waiter and you've just made me realize I've not had to clear up vomit in over a month thanks to the lockdown. There is nothing worse than trying to get vomit out of the crevices in a chair. This happened to a friend of my wife. She met a guy on a dating site. They agreed to meet at a strip mall parking lot and go to dinner together from there. He asks if he can drive her car, because it's a Camaro and he's never driven one. So they go together in her car, to a restaurant a couple miles away. Dinner goes okay, nothing too crazy. Then he gets up to go to the bathroom and never comes back. After 10 minutes, she gets up to check on him, and her car is gone. He's dashed on the bill and stolen her car. She pays the bill, and gets an Uber home, and calls the police to report her car stolen. Turns out the guy just left it in the parking lot where they originally met, and seems to think he did nothing wrong. Last I heard he's still being charged with auto theft. I genuinely can't imagine allowing a stranger to drive my car and then leaving the keys with them the whole night. I was a waiter at a very famous, upscale restaurant and a gentleman approached the matron requesting someone take pictures of him proposing to his girlfriend. Since I was the closest butthole to the matron, I was tasked with performing this duty. After stalking the table for a solid hour, the moment was inevitably approaching. I set up at an angle she couldn't see me, and when he busted out the ring I started taking as many pictures as I could. Anyone who has tried to capture a once in a lifetime moment on camera knows that you're not really watching what's going on. You're just trying to frame the moment. After about 20-30 pictures, I slowly realized that she was declining the proposal and the scene was quickly degenerating into a 5-alarm dumpster fire. However, I was far enough away that I couldn't hear what was being said and couldn't be sure of what was transpiring, so I continued taking pictures just in case. Finally, I stepped back and watched the scene unfold in reality as she stormed out of the restaurant in embarrassment and he scrambled to pay the bill and chase after her. He'd requested that I use my phone and send the best pictures to him. Needless to say, he never approached us for the pictures, and I have about 100 plus pictures of a wedding proposal gone wrong somewhere deep in my iCloud photo bank. What a sad ending to a first date. Not waiter, but I used to be a banquet cook for large corporate events weddings. Had your very typical Bridezilla one weekend. She ended getting hammered at the reception and slept with a groomsman in the honeymoon suite. Needless to say, husband left her immediately. At least I got a lot of compliments on my crab cakes. Edit. Since people have asked, crab cakes. Simple, good, backfin crab meat. Don't frick with lump. Not worth it. Cake falls apart. Make sure it Maryland blue crab or you're not an American. Raw eggs. mustard powder, juice and zest of a lemon, parsley if you're fancy, none if you're not. I don't judge. Old Bay seasoning. Can you tell where I'm from yet? Just enough breadcrumbs and mayo to form a solid patty. That's it. Any more ruins the cake. DM me if you want more coherent instructions. Not a disaster, but it could have been. Guy hires private room in the very fine dining establishment I'm working in. Dinner for two. Champagne. Proposal dinner. Gives us instructions to bring the champagne. When she says yes, I jump the gun and poke my head into the room holding the champagne, just to check I haven't missed it. Guy sees me, has a panic fit and throws up all over the table. Woman is very concerned, goes over to see if he's okay. He hits frick it and pulls out the ring, drops to one knee and proposes, with vom still on him and the table. She bursts out laughing, says yes and kisses him on the head. Get them a new table in a different room and serve the champagne. MFW, I hope I find love like that one day. This was one of the purest things I've ever read. I used to bartend at a Yard House in the before times. Yard House is a corporate place that's basically a nicer sports bar with a ton of beer on tap with stupid, giant novelty glasses. I had a couple at the bar during happy hour drinking from one of the big glasses and they ordered some onion rings that were half price. He jokingly proposed with an onion ring and she started laughing and jokingly said yes. Then he busted out an actual ring. She wasn't laughing anymore. Guy 1 and GF are fondling each other at my bar. Guy 2 joins them at the bar and they quickly separate and behave. The three go off into the casino but stop back for drinks a few times. Early AM Guy 2 does a shot and walks away. I can tell he isn't happy. He comes back and says he has a couple of hours to kill before his plane leaves. We get to chatting and he tells me he just broke up with his GF as suspects she snuck up to the room and nailed his best friend when he couldn't find either of them for an hour. I ask if it was Guy 1 and GF. He confirms it and I let him know he is making the right choice as they were making out at the bar before he came down. He thanks me for confirming, leaves a huge tip, and lets me know what is happening in case there is any confusion with the hotel. An hour or so later Guy 1 and GF are at the bar whispering and arguing. I casually ask if everything is okay. They say they are locked out of their room and can't find their friend who paid for the room. They tried to charge the bill to the room too but my computer showed the room was empty. I told them Guy 2 had been in earlier but checked out and his flight was already in the air. Then I watched the meltdown. Guy 2 had paid for his BFF and GF to spend a week in Vegas with him. They cheated and got caught. He checked out and flew home and they had nowhere to stay for the week and no money for even basic food. Their luggage had been packed and left in the baggage hold. They did everything they could to get out of paying for their drinks as they were hella expensive. Left no tip and didn't have a place to sleep or even change clothing at 5 AM. TLDR. Don't cheat on the person paying your way if you can't pay your own way. Must have been pretty satisfying to leave them there. Freaking idiots. I used to work as a hostess at a thank deity it's the weekend already. Guy makes a reservation at the most booked table. It's by the window, all romantic etc. Also super visible from any other part of the restaurant. Comes in, all dressed up and with a suitcase. Strange, but okay. A few minutes later, his date arrives. They laugh, flirt. We actually thought it's an anniversary or he is going to propose or something the way it was going. Nope. Halfway through the evening she starts screaming at him. He broke up with her and actually packed her suitcase. Then paid and left her there sobbing at the table alone. We got her a brownie on the house. Because just watching that we felt freaking awful. This is the worst day of your life. Take a brownie. Not my story, but my partner just told about this happening at his work. We live in a pretty large university college and one time a guy came in with a plant for a date. He sat with it at the table, ordered it food, drinks, and dessert. He was a total gentleman to the plant. Turns out he lost a bet with his frat brothers. Bartender for a couple on a Tinder date. They talk for about an hour. He goes to the bathroom but left his jacket on the back of his chair with his wallet and keys in. She stole them, stole his car, and went shopping. That poor schmuck refused to call the cops for an hour because it was going so well. I felt bad for him. And this proves me right to take my wallet and keys everywhere with me. Frick you Jessica, I'm not paranoid. I, 22M at the time, was busboy at a 200-seat restaurant that was part of a sporting club. I'd been there for long enough to have a feel for the personalities of the customers. On this particular night, one of my tables was a first date. The girl was lovely, all smiles and very pleasant. The guy was sort of normal, seemed a bit quiet. He put off some fairly clear signals that he would prefer to be left alone though. That's okay, some prefer minimal service. What I did notice though, was that the guy was talking to her quietly, bit forcefully, and almost non-stop, sometimes gripping her arm firmly, in a way that suggested that she wouldn't be able to pull away easily. I couldn't hear a word that was said, but the lady was looking more and more terrified all the time. Like, nearly about to wet herself terrified. A complete change from her pleasant nature when they had walked in. I told the waitress on the adjacent section that I wasn't sure about what was going on and asked if she wouldn't mind checking on the table to let me know her thoughts. Waitress went to the table, said a few quick words and came back to me. Out of earshot, she said, "Yeah, I think we have to get her out of here." We let the manageress know what was going on. The guy had booked his table. Good, we had his name. Outside at the taxi rank, by some miracle, there was a female cabbie in the line. I ignored the protests of the other drivers. I hopped in and told the cabbie the situation, and offered her $20 to wait around the back of the restaurant. I said, "Please don't wait for a destination, just drive. Something's really wrong with her date." The cabbie didn't need the $20. We had a front desk call the guy over the PA for an urgent call. This would delay him while they tried to figure what the call was, and then realizing that he had actually won a meat tray. They were raffled off at various intervals through the night. "Just wait here while we fetch it for you." As soon as creepy guy was out of sight, I asked his date if she needed to get out of here. She just trembled and nodded, figuring that she probably wasn't in the mood to trust her male at that point. My waitress friend escorted her through the kitchen and out to the waiting cab where she slipped away quick as you please. The guy came back to an empty table, and staff seeming to be oblivious to where his lady friend had gone. We didn't get much of the story, other than that the lady was set up on a blind date by a mutual friend who told her that this guy was okay. Way to go team. Good on all of you for intervening. I kept my interaction with the table brief, but I'll never forget the time I had a couple come in and as I was setting down the entree the lady looked at her man stone cold, pointed to his phone and said, "So who this hoe you been texting?" Me. Of course, neither being the hoe nor texter in question made definite haste away from that conversation. I do remember her asking to split the bill at the register though. Couples fight in restaurants a lot. That or maybe they argue everywhere. I couldn't say. I worked as a waiter for years and I could not begin to count the number of arguments I saw, but one guy comes to mind above all of them. This guy must have been 50-60 years old and got angry with his lady. He actually threw a snit and stomped off and was wandering around the restaurant and looking back at her and scowling. It was like a child throwing a temper tantrum, but most children aren't even this dramatic usually. It was nauseating to watch. Not a waiter, but I saw a first date next to me. In short, girl states she has an allergy to pineapple. Guy says okay in an "I don't believe you" kinda way. At some point he scraped some pineapple glaze off his dessert and onto her spoon when she popped outside to make a call. She comes back and eats without noticing too much. Has a severe reaction. Guy freaks out and tries to run but gets stopped by my girlfriend who is suspicious of him. Manager administers the girl's EpiPen and ambulance and police are called. Absolute clusterfuck situation. I watched a proposal in the dining room of the hotel I worked at. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the dessert and ring box to be brought out. She saw the box and just started saying no 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 no, and told the crushed groom, "We need to talk." People who initially were clapping just slowed to a dead silence. She ended up going back to the room, collecting her things and leaving, while he cried at the table for a few minutes. It was super depressing for all the staff, guests and that poor guy. And this is why you shouldn't propose unless you already know the person will say yes. Don't assume they will. Have an adult conversation about future and ask after they have made it clear they will not be telling you no. I remember serving one night, and this strange guy came in to sit at the bar. He was a little disheveled with an unkempt beard. He had trouble speaking, and he just generally seemed like someone you might imagine had difficulty socially or with dating. He had brought a bag in with him, and after he sat down, he pulled out a picture of a woman. He stood the picture up on the counter, in front of the chair beside him, and he ordered 2 drinks and his meal. 1 drink was for the woman, and it ended up going untouched. A lot of my coworkers saw it and laughed about it in the kitchen. They thought it was the most pathetic thing they'd ever witnessed. I thought something was a little off about the scene though, or that there was more to it than my coworkers were giving it credit for. He didn't strike me as a desperate loner. There was an air of sadness around him, but not because he was pathetic. It felt more like grief. I talked to the bartender about it later, who actually knew the man. Apparently his wife had just passed, and this restaurant was where they went on their first date together years ago. His wife was the woman in the photo, and he came into the restaurant to share one last drink with her. Incredible. What a story. What a beautiful, painful thing to witness, and what a sweet gesture of the husband to connect with his wife. AWW, this got me. I was a waiter at a pretty high-end hotel restaurant. It was about 3 PM and I was the only one on the floor as it was normally very slow at the time. There was only one party seated and it was a middle-aged man and woman. You could tell they weren't married. I went over and asked if they wanted anything to drink and they both got mimosas, I think. I went back with their drinks and asked if they were also planning on ordering food. They said yes, but that they're in no rush and will let me know when they were ready to order. About 15 minutes goes by when this man shows up at the front desk, starts looking around, yells "I freaking knew it, UB," and starts walking towards the couple sitting down. The woman stands up and the guy remained seated. It became clear that the woman was having an affair with another man, and the husband came in to confront them. He grabbed her hand and walked her out, but not before telling the man to stay the frick away from my wife. The man remained seated at the table, turns to me and waves me over. I go over and he says in a perfectly calm tone, "Cobb salad please." Not a waiter, but once witnessed a woman ghost her date at the end of the night. It was a fancy jazz club, and the couple racked up what I assume was at least a $500 bill. There was a ton of wine and they went through a few expensive entrees. When it came time to pay, the woman snuck out while the man was in the bathroom and just disappeared. The dude was distraught. I'm a waitress in my father's restaurant. It's not that big, but we're usually full during weekends. A lot of couple come here cause it's kinda chic for a French restaurant. Anyway, once there was a couple, early 30s. The dude arrived earlier than the girl, so either it was something like a date but E number. The girl ordered everything. She chose all the dishes, the dessert and even the wine without even asking the guy what he would like to have. They both didn't talk, only said good evening, weird for a date. But when I came at their table to serve the wine, they started to argue about their relationship. The dude was convinced that she cheated on him, and you know what? She admitted that and said very loud that he was bad in bed. At this moment any single cell in my body was cringing. They kept arguing for 10 minutes until I decided to stop them, cause they were almost yelling and so disturbing the 15 people in the restaurant. The woman asked if she could have another bottle of wine, and she left within 5 minutes with the bottle. I felt so bad for this guy that I gifted him his whiskey coca. Jeez, poor guy. I once had a couple that I didn't realize was a couple, and once they were done with their meal I asked if they would like separate checks because I honestly thought the woman was the man's mother, and they looked at me with confused, offended expressions and replied with "One check please." They are now regulars who come in almost every week and despise me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.